reincarnated itself into this sort of concern of it takes too long to build or it costs too much. This view that, we need to reach net zero by 2030, and therefore, because nuclear power plants can take longer than 5 years to build, we just shouldn't even be considering them. Which I always find is a sort of a funny suggestion, because net zero absolutely should be a goal. 2030, as many would like, is hopeful, and also the job won't be done once we get to net zero. We'll still need energy after 2030, and we'll still want electricity to be cheaper after 2030, after net zero. So the argument for not building nuclear now because it takes too long and may cost too much doesn't really hold muster in sort of the grand scheme of the next 100 years of energy needs.
That was a short snippet from this week's episode. Stay tuned for the full conversation. Hello and welcome back to the Mission Shunya podcast. First things first, I hope you are doing well. Thanks for your feedback on the nuclear energy series. I am glad that you are enjoying it. While we covered Nuclear Energy 101 in the previous episode, in this episode we take on a big and often controversial question. What is the real case for nuclear energy in today's clean energy transition? This episode was originally framed to unpack the many myths and facts surrounding nuclear energy, from safety concerns and public perception to its emerging role in climate strategies worldwide. But the conversation with our guest today went well beyond that. We explored how the nuclear narrative is shifting from its historical association with weapons and Cold War fears to its modern framing as a clean and scalable energy source. Also, the changing global energy policy landscape, including how countries are repositioning nuclear in their net zero strategies. And we also explored the critical role of nuclear in stabilizing modern grids, especially as renewables scale up and AI-driven demand surges. And finally, we did not miss discussing nuclear project lifecycle, timelines, delay, and the anti-nuclear sentiment. So with that intro, let's welcome our guest.
Hi, I'm Richard Orlington, partner at Radiant Energy Group, an energy consultancy for a clean energy transition. I'm here based in London and excited to speak on the podcast today.
So Richard, let's start with the origin stories of the Radiant Energy Group. So how did a group of like-minded people come together, and what's the key focus, and has it changed over the years?
So Radiant Energy Group is an international consultancy focused on the energy transition and providing the low carbon, high energy solutions for tomorrow, supporting those. At the moment, we're made up of 3 partners and a few other associates. And how our partners all came together. Originally, Mark Nelson and myself, Mark's the founder of Radiant Energy Group, and we met at Cambridge University, where we were both in the same college studying engineering, a few years apart, but we were both on the cross-country running team. So we'd go on many long runs together and discuss all manner of topics, but nuclear, which was Mark's master's focus, was always a primary focus of our discussions. And since that early age, I've always been interested in it and joined Mark at Radiant Energy Group a few years ago. Our other partner, Maddie Hilly, she was at Environmental Progress in California with Mark, and their big parts of the work was also focused on nuclear energy and around saving Diablo Canyon, the sort of one remaining nuclear power plant in California at the time, that they have since succeeded in doing. And yeah, Mark span out from Environmental Progress, set up Radiant Energy Group, brought Maddie and myself and others along for the journey.
So in this journey, has the focus shifted to largely nuclear, or do you still look at other aspects, the other systems in the overall energy space?
I think from the start, we've always had a focus on nuclear. Of course, nuclear is part of an energy mix, and you can't be talking about nuclear without understanding what's going on in the rest of the energy mix. There's been a few projects we've done that touch on wind, solar, biomass, and gas. But yeah, overall, the focus is definitely on nuclear, and that's a strategic plan on our side. We're a small consultancy, a new consultancy, and we want to position ourselves in the area which is sort of needing that help. And the feeling we have at the time and still is that nuclear is the underappreciated clean energy option of the future. And there's not been a huge amount of competition in the space compared with the other energy options out there. And therefore, we saw it as a strategic niche that we wanted to enter in.
True. I definitely see that there is definitely not much of competition, or rather, there are not many consultants also who are like as well known as Radiant Energy Group. So how did you get into this position? Like, who are the key stakeholders? Who are your clients?
Yeah, so we've got a broad set of clients from those in the uranium world that just want to see more nuclear energy out there on the grid. So there's more people buying their products. There's those in the non-profit world that want to see a better world in whatever shape and form that is, but, clean energy. And therefore they are interested in nuclear and supporting nuclear. And then there's other companies within the nuclear industry in recruiting, in nuclear power plant design, construction. And yeah, we help sort of that broad range of client bases. And then, for each of these, we do different types of projects. So a key focus for us since the start, but especially now, a bit of a pivotal year, is on nuclear restarts. And it's the sort of surest way to increase excitement about nuclear if we're able to change the political policy in the likes of Germany, Belgium, Spain, Taiwan, where the plan is to get rid of nuclear. And if that was to change, if nuclear was to be restarted in Germany, for example, that would have sort of seismic impact on the industry. Suddenly, there's this fresh demand for uranium and all the parts that go into the nuclear industry, which would boost prices, boost confidence in the industry, and also boost the political support. In Europe, what we see is, there's for the last decade or two, the continent's been stuck with half the countries led by the likes of France being very pro-nuclear, and then the other half being led by Germany being very anti-nuclear. But if Germany, as sort of their new government has hinted at here and there, does reverse its nuclear phase out and go on the pro-nuclear side, or at least the nuclear agnostic side, and study that allows the EU to give nuclear the same formidable support that it's been giving wind and solar and other clean energy options.
True. There's a lot of activity from the government, and that is very key to kind of move the industry either this way, that way. And as you rightly pointed out, it's equivalent to what's happening for the terms of support for clean energy. But before we get to nuclear restarts and other things, let's look at the big picture. As a consultant, you would know things much better than what normally people would do. So how big is the industry in terms of size? You did mention Europe, which is actually a big player in terms of having significant installations. But where are the future projects coming up, and how do you see things shaping up in the long term? I think in nuclear you have to speak about long term rather than medium term, right?
Absolutely. So the lay of the land at the moment is there's 32 countries that are using nuclear energy. And 5 countries in particular represent 3/4 of that use. So the key 5 countries are the US, China, France, Russia, and South Korea. US has the largest nuclear fleet. France has the largest nuclear as a share of its total electricity. China is the country that's building the most nuclear power plants at the moment. Russia is the country that has been exporting the most nuclear power plants for the last decade. And South Korea, it's complicated. It's very much politically driven, on and off. But they have a very high share of nuclear in their grid and a very good nuclear industry with some success stories in exporting recently. So in those 32 countries, across those 32 countries, what we have is 170 power plants that are currently operating. So it's really not that many. If I was better at memorizing things by rote, I could probably read through the Wikipedia article and remember all 170 power plant names. There's that few. And those 170 power plants together generate 9-10% of the world's electricity at the moment. So they're incredibly powerful, these power plants. Each power plant might have more than one reactor. I think there's 440 reactors, roughly around the world. And the big story with nuclear is, this at COP, in Dubai, it's now almost 30 countries have come together and pledged, to work to tripling nuclear generation by 2050. And that's huge growth, and huge growth in the context of the past. So over the past 20 years, nuclear generation has effectively flatlined. Since 2003, less than 0.2%. We've seen less than 0.2% annual growth in generation, which is tiny. And tiny when we think, the exponential growth we've been seeing in wind and solar. And nuclear, that's sort of third element of sort of the clean energy grid of the future, just hasn't been seeing that growth. So these next 25 years as we triple nuclear are going to be very interesting. A lot will have to change compared to the past 25 years.
Exactly. That particular statement from the delegation at COP also caught my attention and was really keen. That's when I started doing little more research on things. And as you rightly said, when you look at a Wikipedia page, there is also one more part in the page that you will find out that number of reactors active, number of reactors non-active. So that also is a little complicated. Some would have been phased out, but some are expected to start again. So how do you kind of put this into perspective? Like, as you said, in a power plant, some reactors might be off. Is it like a cyclic maintenance, or is it like strategically have to be turned off have to be decommissioned after a period?
Yeah, so nuclear power plants was first built in the 50s and 60s. And back then there was a real rush to figure out which is the power plant design that works best for the world. And there's a whole mix of different engineerings that were used. And some of them worked and some of them didn't work as well. And the ones that didn't work as well, they would need more maintenance, more refueling, and they decided that they wouldn't be life extending them. And they were often retired early. By contrast, the reactors that have proven themselves as the winning design, so the pressurized water reactor and the boiling water reactor. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe they make up sort of a good 90% of all reactors at the moment. And those reactors are seeing repeated renewals. And originally they were designed for 40 years. At around 40 years, they did the engineering inspection of everything and realized, actually, these reactors are still fit and healthy to run a bit longer. So they were given 10 or 20-year life extensions. And then coming up to 60 years, as some of the oldest reactors are, they've done the same set of maintenance checks. And again, they're seeing these reactors in healthy condition, a few upgrades here and there, and they'll be able to go on to 80 years. And already in the US, there's discussions, research into how do we get these reactors going on to 100 years. So, while there might be 1,000 reactors that have been built, the ones that have aged out are long gone. And the ones that we have at the moment, we can expect to carry on operating for a lot longer, assuming there's no political change of will. That's in the last 20 years, that's been the real killer of nuclear reactors, not engineering issues, but political concerns.
No, let's talk about that because that's a key point in the entire landscape, the political will. In the recent years, especially, we spoke about COP announcement. So if there's an announcement in COP, it definitely means that there is a political will to kind of see this happening. So what's actually changed this when everyone was talking about going only wind and solar with batteries? But now everyone's saying like, okay, we need to fix the nuclear puzzle also. We need nuclear in the mix also. So what's kind of triggered everything?
I think in part, it's a realization that goals of doing 100% wind, solar, renewables are proving to be trickier than planned. And the value that a baseload source of clean electricity provides to the mix. And when I say hard to provide, what we're seeing is often with the more wind and solar you have in your grids, the more the capture price drops massively. And suddenly those wind and solar projects don't become as profitable. And it gets economically harder and harder to build more of these projects. And therefore, governments are realizing that if they want to get to 100% clean electricity, they need something to help balance that out. And there's a whole host of options being considered, batteries, interconnectors, hydro. But often these, they have their downsides and might be limited in how much they can be used. But nuclear is truly something that any country can build and is able to complement wind and solar in a way that sort of helps wind and solar maintain their profitability and sort of avoids them having to cannibalize and reduce their capture prices.
This scenario also, the discussion, as you mentioned, the discussion around the capture prices, complementing nature, is all fine when people understand that. But most of the places where you kind of have this policy advocacy and things happening, it's hugely polarizing. It's probably to an extent where you think the projects will never happen in these regions. I believe the nuclear accidents are one reason to this. Is there another angle? Of course, nuclear weapons and other things could be another angle. But why do you think there is even more polarizing angle to the entire realization that nuclear can actually be a good baseload resource?
I think, anti-nuclearism has changed a lot over 70 years or so. I think it helps to really look at the past and understand where has this anti-nuclearism come from. And I think, the origin of nuclear energy is very much an origin of nuclear weapons in the 40s. And that's, an origin that is steeped in fear. And this original anti-nuclearism was a concern for nuclear war. And, we see it in Germany. You had East and West Germany. Both sides didn't have any weapons of their own, but were home to Russian and American nuclear weapons. And they were worried. They didn't want to be at the center of a sort of World War III. And therefore, there was little they could do to stop the weapons. They didn't belong to them. So the pushback they had was against the next closest thing, which was the nuclear energy, the nuclear power plants being built in the country. Originally, anti-nuclearism came from that concern about the weapons. And back then, in the 50s and 60s, there was a strong link between the two. The nuclear power plants were being built to be able to get the fuel to make the weapons. But that link has long gone. Now what we've seen is anti-nuclearism has had to change, reposition itself. And for a long while, the concern was around waste and safety. And that made sense after sort of the concerning images from Chernobyl and Fukushima. But there's good data out there by the UN and I believe World Health Organization that have looked at those accidents. And, it still surprises me. And when I tell friends, it surprises them. To this day in Chernobyl, fewer than 50 people fatalities can be directly linked to Chernobyl and the radiation released there. And near Fukushima, there's debatable whether it's 0 or 1 death. Those are sad numbers to hear, but in the context of industrial accidents, those are very small. And in the context of the concern that the world sees in climate change, those numbers are negligible. Recent anti-nuclearism has sort of reincarnated itself into this sort of concern of it takes too long to build or it costs too much. This view that, we need to reach net zero by 2030, and therefore, because nuclear power plants can take longer than 5 years to build, we just shouldn't even be considering them. Which I always find is a sort of a funny suggestion, because, net zero absolutely should be a goal. 2030, as many would like, is hopeful. And also, the job won't be done once we get to net zero. We'll still need energy after 2030, and we'll still want electricity to be cheaper after 2030, after net zero. So, the argument for not building nuclear now because it takes too long and may cost too much doesn't really hold muster in sort of the grand scheme of the next 100 years of energy needs.
I definitely appreciate the merit in your argument while saying that you need energy resource going beyond 2030, 2050, 2070. So that is really true. And you can't say nuclear will not fit that puzzle. But on a lighter note, generally as an observer in the space for quite some time as in the energy sector compared to other projects, nuclear projects definitely take a long time. I think there have been cases, cost overruns, and even like power purchase agreements had to be revised, because I see there is merit. Like, for example, in some cases, the cost overruns have been to have additional safety, securing more permits, and to also ensure that the waste, spent fuel and other things are treated well. So are these the primary reasons? Why can't these be taken into consideration upfront? Why does this have to come over the course of probably the construction phase of the project? Why do you think this is happening?
I'd say, in modern reactors that are getting built, the thinking about what to do with the waste is considered from the designing stage before any concrete is even poured. The nuclear industry is arguably the best industry when it comes to energy waste. And that is the only energy industry that takes full account of the waste it generates. And there's some examples out there of power plants built sort of last century that were decommissioned and returned back to grassy meadows after they were decommissioned. And the nuclear industry has amazing accounting of every ounce of spent fuel that leaves its reactors and where it's been put in storage, and maintaining that security at all those storage sites. And, to this day, there have been no fatalities from nuclear waste. And I think, that's a testament to how well managed this nuclear waste is. And, will continue to be. The industry is growing and building on past lessons, and will only get safer in those regards. And with regards to the time it takes to build, yes, nuclear power plants do take a long time to build. I think, the global average is 7 years since 1990 from sort of first concrete pour to electricity going on to the grid. But that time has actually improved. The global average since records began was around 8 years. So we are seeing power plants be built faster than they were before. That's a global picture. It's definitely a different picture in the West. In the West, we've got stories like Flamanville 3, Ollingt 3, Vogel, Hinkley Point C, all with their own long delays. And they're the delays, they're down to the fact that these countries haven't been building big mega projects as much as they used to. And there's not that experience in building big mega projects. Also, they haven't been building nuclear power plants. So they've lost that experience, the supply chains, the understanding of how to build these nuclear power plants. But I'd say even with those long delays, there's still a positive take on that. So Hinkley Point C in the UK, it's expected to take 18 years for its construction to be completed, which is, arguably 3 times longer than it should be. But if we compare Hinkley Point C, it'll be 18 years to complete versus the UK's largest wind farm, Hornsea 2. That took 6 years to complete. And Hornsea 2 will be generating 5 terawatt hours of electricity per year. But Hinkley Point C will be generating 25 terawatt hours per year of electricity. So, nuclear might take 3 times longer than the largest wind farms at the moment, but it'll be, once completed, that project will generate 5 times more electricity and be able to do so for maybe 3 times as many years, with giving it 75-year plus lifespan. And yeah, it's sort of the way we like to think of it is big things come to those who wait. It's sort of a national scale marshmallow test. Do you want 1 marshmallow now or 2 if you wait a bit of time? So, these long construction timelines need to be taken into context.
That's a wonderful analogy, and I personally vouch for that statement. But tell me one thing. I think when you look at the numbers in terms of individual plant sizes, even for what one country might look as large, another country an emerging country might look at as like something small to medium, or the other way around. So that dynamics is also changing in terms of construction of nuclear power plants. Is it because that changing the size of the project itself, does it make it easy to get approval, build and commission? Is that the primary reason?
At the moment, all power plants need to go through the same regulatory hurdles to ensure that they're safe. And that, will take a similar amount of time. Where the difference comes is if it's a smaller reactor, there won't be as much concrete that you need to pour. And the components that you use within the reactor might be more standardized and quicker to build in the supply chain already there. So there has been a shift in discussions in nuclear towards these so-called small modular reactors. And, notionally, it's reactors under 300 megawatts in size. But, we see Rolls-Royce, which their SMR, termed SMR, is definitely over 300 megawatts. So it's a fairly relaxed term. And, by contrast, the large reactors, those are 1,000 megawatts plus. The largest, the EPR reactors is 1,600 megawatts reactor. And generally, I'd say, large countries are building large reactors because large countries are able to support the construction of these large reactors. They're able to stump up the political investments into these mega projects. Whereas a small country won't be able to have, might not be able to have that same access to capital. Also, the ability of your grid to be able to deal with a large power plant is important. If your grid is 5 gigawatts, you don't really want to be having a 1.6 gigawatt reactor on the grid, because if that trips or goes down for refueling, suddenly you need to turn on 1.6 gigawatts very quickly. And that puts a bit of strain on the grid. So that's another reason why a lot of small countries are thinking more about going for these smaller reactors. Worth noting, there's small reactors aren't new. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, most reactors were small. We started building reactors with only a few megawatts and went from tens of megawatts to hundreds of megawatts to now having thousands of megawatts. And now in the 21st century, the industry is thinking, all right, maybe it's not just large reactors. Maybe we should build a few of those smaller ones too, and explore the benefits of economies of scale, of repeatability, in addition to, what we see in the large reactors, which is the economies of size.
True. That's valid. And it's good to know that the safety aspect and project approval phase is actually the same. So that kind of gives confidence on ensuring safety and product quality or project quality in nuclear. Now, going to the other end, you did mention about large countries, small countries. So there is also this shift. We spoke about it very early, nuclear restarts. So what has triggered this at this point? Why are countries now looking at restarting? We have Japan, we have some projects in the US, and now probably even Germany, which just completely shut down just a couple of years back, is now looking to at least thinking on that line. So what has actually triggered this shift in the policy?
I'd say, so in America, I think it's a different story to Japan and Germany. So in America, the reactors were shut down due to very low gas prices, and the nuclear reactors weren't competitive. And therefore, when they were shut down in a knowing way that they might be restarted. And now, in 2025, what we're seeing is in the US, there's increasing electricity demand from reindustrialization, from increased home demand for air conditioning, for electrification of the home, but also AI and huge demands from the data center developers to power their reactors. So suddenly there is the economic case for those restarts to happen. By contrast, in Japan and Germany, I think the drive is, there's that element too coming through. But there's also the element that the grids are a lot more reliant on dirty coal as an electricity source, but also importing coal and gas from other countries for their electricity. And they see the need to have energy security, generate their own clean electricity. And the value that has in terms of national security, but also in terms of the cost of electricity. In a set of international public opinion polling we've done, we've looked at 31 countries, and the countries where we asked the question, which electricity source is going to help reduce your electricity bills at home the best? Nuclear, wind, solar, biomass, or gas or carbon capture. And the countries where nuclear came out on top were Japan, South Korea, Sweden, Germany, and Taiwan. All countries that have seen a period of nuclear being cut down on. And the public have that lived experience. They've seen nuclear disappear from their grid, and they've seen their electricity bills go up after that. And therefore, in those countries, the public sees the value of nuclear in reducing their electricity bills. And, politicians, hopefully listen to the public, and in these countries are, reconsidering turning these power plants back on to help reduce those electricity prices.
That's a good point that you mentioned about politicians listening to the public. So public perception has probably kind of changed also. It kind of now looks a little trendy to talk about nuclear restart, small modular reactors, different materials and all things. Even there are a lot of startups in a way in nuclear space. So this is a new generation of all the scientists, investors, and everything actually helping shift the narrative to make it more positive and trendy in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a couple of shifts in public support. One is since the energy crisis in sort of the 2020s, early 2020s, and there suddenly the public saw their electricity prices rising and saw the need of reliable electricity. And I believe, the public around the world has always seen nuclear as a reliable source of electricity, but suddenly in an energy crisis, they ranked reliability as more important than ever. And that helped drive up nuclear support. Since then, there's been a huge number of good news stories about restarts, about the triple nuclear pledge, about banks and big energy demanders supporting nuclear, and about all these different innovations coming through. And I think that's helped give a buzz amongst the public. Suddenly they see the nuclear industry that is excited, that is keen to grow. And that positivity comes through when the public reads the news. And yeah, I expect as the years go on, if that carries on, public support will continue to rise.
Is creating a positive public perception also a big part in the work that you do, or being asked by companies and stakeholders to kind of drive positive public perception in a way?
I wouldn't say that. I think a big part of our work is understanding what the public thinks and why they think, but we're not there to change the way that public thinks. We're just there to make the sort of good reasons for and against nuclear and help others make those nuanced discussions with the public. Yeah, we like to think of ourselves as providing the sort of data-driven tools and analysis for discussions about nuclear. So yeah, as mentioned, we have these 31 countries, and one recent stat that's come out in our polls that I think will be interesting to politicians in the future is that those that are least concerned about climate change, you can call them climate action skeptics. Of all the clean energy options that we asked these people about, nuclear comes out as top. And in a world where, we'd like to decarbonize fully in just 25 years by 2050, you're going to see changes in the political landscape. There's bound to be a few countries where an anti-net zero prime minister, president comes in. And therefore, anyone that's minded in building a net zero future, they want to be building a grid that is able to deal with these political turbulences. So we think, this offers an opportunity for nuclear in that, if you build nuclear projects and suddenly an anti-net zero president comes in, like he or she isn't going to tear those down like they might do for wind and solar. And I think, we're already seeing this play out a bit in the US, where Trump is very much putting making it hard for offshore wind to be built, putting tariffs on solar panels, making those harder to build in the US. But the nuclear power industry in the US might be able to fare better than wind and solar because it's got that support amongst the anti-net zero crowd.
That's interesting, Richard. Now, to wrap up around the work that you do, and since you mentioned about the global landscape, you did mention about what's happening in the US, and yes, it's kind of a little scary at times to look at that. But in terms of the work that you do as a group, what are the other countries that looks promising in terms of progressing in the right direction? Anything coming up in Asia? I think I also read about some projects being considered in the Middle East. And are these markets also going to be attractive, or do you think we can anticipate more news and more action on ground in these markets?
Yeah, I think so. If we go through country by country as they come to mind, and how I see things at the moment, and excitement for the future. So start off with China. The country is building maybe half of all reactors at the moment. It's the main builder of nuclear reactors. And there, the supply chain is excellent at building reactors. And the big question is, are they going to build more reactors, speed up the rate of building? And I think that's a sort of a political decision of, the industry is able to deliver it, but it's the regulators and the politicians that manage the regulators that need to approve that. And, that will be exciting to see. I think, as China gets more concerned about energy security, that's going to drive them to want to build nuclear at a faster rate. Next up is Russia. While China is building the most reactors in its own country, Russia is building the most reactors abroad. So at the moment, it's, building in Bangladesh, Egypt, Turkey. There's got plans in place with Uzbekistan. It's in discussions with Kazakhstan. And what countries will come next? Which countries will Russia want to export to next? They've got these great modular reactors, which they're able to build in Russia, put on a barge, a boat, and ship around the world to whatever country wants to buy a reactor. And that opens up this opportunity of, being able to build hopefully slightly quicker and cheaper, and do so for a country that wants that as an option. The question is, which country will they be looking to build at next? In Europe, the question for me is, it's been a few decades, and there's only been 3 or 4 large nuclear construction projects approved. Poland is the exciting country at the moment in Europe. Lots of large plans there. I think in the UK, there's plans for Sizewell C that should be finalized soon. But the question will be, which countries will be building large projects next, and will the likes of Germany, Belgium, Spain reversed their nuclear phase-outs. In the US, previously, under the Biden administration, there was some favorable Inflation Reduction Act grants, shall we say, for the nuclear industry, financial support for the nuclear industry. And believe those have been phased out. And now, there's discussion of what comes next. One thing that we're definitely seeing in the US is a push towards rethinking nuclear regulation and helping to speed up the process of approving new designs. So there, I can really see it as the sort of the test bed for potential future reactors. And there's, as we've seen historically, there's a lot of engineering risks. Some reactor designs just aren't economical, and others do prove themselves economical. So that will be interesting to see. There'll be, some success stories that come out of nowhere, but also some bad news stories from, these new designs that get trialed. And there I'm speaking very much in terms of economic outcomes and less on a concern around safety. Just to put the record straight. In India, there's long been discussion of growing use of nuclear. And there, the government is keen to partner with private industry to build these power plants, and that's proved itself to be a bit slower. But I do think things are coming together and plans are forming, and the new government is very keen to get things sped up. So that will be interesting to see. Another global superpower, is it able to grow its construction of nuclear as fast as the others? And then, I think looking at a list I've got here, in Africa, we've got Ghana and Kenya that are very keen to start building nuclear. Rwanda too. So it'll be interesting there to see, who's building first, which reactors are they building. And then Indonesia, and you mentioned Middle East there. I think it's really Saudi Arabia that shines through as wanting to build the most out of the Arab nations. And I think part of that is they've seen the UAE next door had a tremendously successful construction of the Baraka nuclear power plant. 4 units that came online in quick succession and now generate 25% of the country's clean electricity. And if you look on we've got sort of this metric of kilowatt hours of clean electricity generated per person in the country, and how that changes over time. And no country has been able to add as much clean electricity from a single source per person as the UAE. So UAE also does incredibly well with their build out of solar, but their build out of nuclear has been world leading. And I think Saudi Arabia looks at that as a way in which they can free up their use of oil to make electricity and be able to sell more of that oil abroad. There's a great story I heard in the UAE where they didn't know whether their final reactor would come online on time. So they made sort of due provision for just in case and bought plenty of gas to be able to power their electricity in the country. The energy crisis struck. Suddenly, gas prices went up massively. But fortunately, this final reactor did come online on time. So, the company that had bought all of this gas suddenly was sitting on huge amounts of spare gas. They didn't even know what to do with. Didn't need it for its national electricity. So they sold it on the world market on the spot price and managed to make up huge profits, which effectively paid off that sort of final reactor. I've not done the numbers to see how it all adds up, but I thought that was a great story to why these Middle Eastern countries, which have huge amounts of energy already from their fossil fuel sources, why they are interested in nuclear, because it helps free up those fossil fuels to sell abroad to help the country profit more.
That's true, and that's very interesting perspective also to put into this discussion. Wonderful. Now, Richard, on a final note, to end a very interesting and insightful conversation, as someone who works with a lot of people and a lot of skeptics, and if you were to live with one line, if you were to kind of give one advice or one statement to a skeptic of nuclear power, what would that be?
Go out and go to Google, Wikipedia, YouTube, and type in your concerns and, learn from, what the internet has to offer. Maybe even buy a book, the old fashioned way. I found it a hugely exciting, rewarding energy topic to learn about. And I'm sure others will do too.
Wonderful. Richard, it was very insightful, personally for me as well, to know about all the projects and all the key movements, actions that are happening across markets, across projects. So thank you very much for taking time to kind of share your experience with me.
Thank you, Girish. It's been a pleasure.
That was Richard from Radiant Energy Group. And I hope this conversation helped you unpack some of the long-standing myths and emerging realities around nuclear energy. As we found out, Richard brings a clear systems-level view of the sector, grounded in data and observation. Whether you are skeptical about nuclear's future or cautiously optimistic, I hope this episode offered valuable context to better inform your views. If this is your first episode, please check the earlier ones and come back again in 2 weeks' time to tune into yet another interesting conversation in this series. Special thanks as always goes out to Jacob and Team Terra Generation for the beautiful cover arts for each and every episode. Terra Generation is a content agency specialized in telling stories in climate, biodiversity and sustainability. You can find out more about them at terrageneration.com. With that, this is Girish Shivakumar signing off, and as always, thank you for listening.